also sweet.
Yes. We don't want to be we fair weather fishermen, at least when there's a camera involved, and we're doing it for fun. So we are here in the studio. So guys, if you're watching this on down the road, you can fast forward a little ahead. We'll let the crowd come on, or you can hang out for just a minute and kind of have a great opportunity because we got Dano, who just got back from what? There was some fishing tournament that you were
It
at?
was just a little club tournament.
A little club tournament?
Yeah, I was just at a little club tournament down there in Lake Hartwell, South Carolina.
Well, while we get some folks jumping on, and guys, y'all drop some questions in there. Say hey, make sure the sound is good. But Dano, what was it? A good tournament? Was it fun? Crowd's good, all that kind of good stuff.
They set a record for attendance. 154,895 or something like that over the other 3 days. Technically 4, because you have a kickoff party now on Thursday night before the tournament starts, and they had 3,000 people waiting to get into that kickoff party at a baseball stadium. That were waiting to go and listen to a band and have a few beverages and whatever, but they had 3,000 people waiting for that. They set a record for day one takeoff with over 3,000 people at Green Pond Landing there in Anderson. And they set a day one record for the expo attendance as well. So it was a week of records for attendance. Now, people talk, you mean 154,000 different people went? No, that's not the way attendance works. Attendance is you may go to take off and the expo and then weigh in, you count as 3. That's the way attendance works. So
Are you calling him fat?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? He counts as 3 people?
He counts as 3, yes, absolutely. And all that from the biggest guy in the room. But it is still record attendance. It was the expo floor was packed. I was there all 3 days.
Did you see anything cool?
Tackle wise?
Yeah.
I never really got into booths. It was so full, I never really was able to get into much of the booths. The new Falcon F-21 Predator is legit. Very well done. The one that was there, I think I sent you a picture, Michael, that you may post or not post or whatever, but it was a cobalt blue, silver pins, a little bit of black in there with a 300 on it. Really, really pretty boat, and I'm not a fan of blue, and that boat was pretty.
Did they tell you how it was performing with a 300 on that 21?
They didn't air it all the way out because it's a customer sold boat, but they said easy 80. They got it to 77 and kind of backed off, but easy 80.
That's cool.
Daiwa had a great show. Losing Strike King, they were just there exhibiting. Who else did I get to see? Missile Baits, they had a great show. We got here at Bucks Island, we have they do that classic colors thing, which Reaction Innovations did a while back at the Birmingham show. They actually did it once before too. A really good idea, and people take ideas. But both of those companies, they're friends of ours. But Missile did a color called Sweet Carolina, which is a darker green pumpkin laminate with another Sunfish IPA type with some flake in it. We'll have a supply of those here by Friday.
Yeah.
For Fish Fest, John's going to bring it. So we got those here. There'll be 2 stores selling it, and that's it. They won't sell them on Missile Baits, but in the quiver.
Okay.
And the D-Bomb and Baby D-Bomb. So we'll have those here. It's a great looking color. I'm actually going to buy some of them. So that was new there. Pretty emotional week for me, honestly. It was my 15th Bassmaster Classic in a row. It was my 15th Classic in a row. and it was Hartwell that was the first one I was invited to work at. So I'll be honest with you, I got a little choked up a few times, but
All right.
and we'll have plenty of videos. Um, Michael will do our Bucks Island on tour, and Michael will have access to all of my advanced angler interviews that we did, and we'll drop some stuff with our guys. We'll drop, the winners interview, which I got 5 minutes with Jason Christie, which is unheard of. I kind of made it happen.
Nice.
I stood up on the stage there right at the end of the press conference, and I just blocked him. I wouldn't let him leave. And James Hall, the editor of Bassmaster, standing behind me, kind of rolling his eyes. But I knew they needed to get a couple of pictures for sponsor stuff, but I just stayed right there. And
Nice. Well played. Well played. Well, hey, it's your 15th time. You ought to know how to get that stuff done. So.
Kind of do, yeah.
All right. Well, guys, we've got 20 of you on here, and I'm already seeing a few questions. Again, we were supposed to be on the water, but the weather is what it is, and that seems to have been the theme, at least for the last few weeks around this region. But here with Bucks Island pro staffer Tracy Robinson, and if you guys know Tracy at all, he knows a thing or two about catching fish around here. I guess we want to start off with just kind of, if we had been out there, what was kind of your going in strategy out here on Neely Henry? Do you have any thoughts, or you been too busy making Hondas?
Now, Neely Henry is about like all the other lakes right now. Everything's day to day. You have to go out there with an open mind every day because the fish are in transition mode already, just because of the time of the year. So Neely Henry's had 80-degree weather. We've had 20-degree weather. We've had floods. We've had high current. And that's been just a weekly change at Neely Henry. But if you look at any of the other lakes, the TVA lakes at Gunnersville, Pickwick, they've encountered the same thing. Pickwick, Gunnersville running 100,000 plus through the floodgates and turbines. Smith Lake last week, they had the big major league guys over there, and the lake rose 9 or 10 feet in a week. So that's been the key thing on every lake for the past few months, is just being able to adapt daily, understanding where the fish are trying to get to. They're coming up on March right now. We're in early March. Fish are thinking the bank. They're thinking spawn. So any of these lakes here in the south right now, the fish got their noses headed towards the bank. You just got to kind of figure out what the conditions did to them right now.
All right.
This time of the year change is consistent. It's a constant, right? Yeah. What's the best thing that some of these folks can do to give themselves a chance? And I think a lot of times people feel like they don't have time to try. Yeah. How do you suggest that they kind of do that?
Each lake is so much different. I would answer that question differently on every lake. So I'm going to talk rivers and lakes right now.
That's fine.
So on the rivers, with the high current that we're having so much of right now, the Neely Henrys, Weiss, even Gunnersville, that main lake with the volume of current, the fish are probably going to be easier to catch, a little bit more predictable off the main lake. So in the creeks, in the big pockets. So what I like to do whenever I go into any of these lakes right now, I would just go into one of those big sloughs, big creeks, big pockets. I'd break it down into front third, middle third, back third. And I would spend some amount of time out there on that front third closest to the river, breaking down the points, throwing jigs, crankbaits, jerk baits, and breaking down that first third of the creek. Spend a good maybe an hour or two on that first third. And depending on your results, or even if your results are good, maybe even moving on to that middle third. And at some time before you get to the back third of that creek, you're going to have a pretty good idea. Okay, these fish haven't really made that big transition completely to the back yet. So I'm going to back up now and go back to that front third and break it down even more, because that's where I got the bites at. So I'm going to start dissecting that a little bit more in detail instead of just giving it a once over like I did that first pass. I try with the forward-facing sonars and technology, too, that's changed the game a lot. One thing you're able to do now, if you've got that, you're kind of able to see where the bait fish are. Mm-hmm. And this time of the year, you're going to be able to follow those bait fish a lot better. So when you get in that first third and you're seeing the bait, that's going to clue you in real quick. I'm probably already in the right area. I can run to the back and probably do some quick forward sonaring, and I'm going to see no bait back there, and I'm going to turn around immediately and go back and start chasing those bait and the fish. So that's changed the game a lot.
That brings up another interesting. I know we got a question come in, but that brings up another interesting thing. For years, sonar in general, and I know there's times that the fish just suck to the bottom and you can't see them. While forward-facing sonar is amazing, has it put people in position to not fish something that they probably should? Because maybe the fish are so tight to cover that it can't be separated, or they're so locked onto the bottom that they can't be seen.
I spent a lot of time at Smith Lake in the past week, and the exact subject you're talking about, Matt Lee and I talked about today. You could pull up onto some of those points at Smith Lake right now, and with that forward-facing sonar, you can see some bait fish out there, but not see any bass. But start making some casts out there, and you start hooking up on fish. And what's happening, those fish are sucked down on the bottom right now at certain times of the day, and they look like just a rock down there. They look like a stump down there off in the sonar there in the forward-facing. And you wouldn't never known those fish were there, even with forward-facing sonar, if you hadn't made some casts there. Matt was telling me about one place that I fished and was catching them this past week that he skipped over because he pulled up there, saw no fish in the water column, which is the best advantage you have with the forward-facing sonar. He saw no fish in that water column and kept on trucking. But I had already fished it earlier in the week, and I knew that there was fish there. So he and I had that conversation just today about not being able to see them on forward-facing sonar.
Yeah, now you're working for the Smith Lake tournament, and this next question's one in a big field like that would.
So real quick before we jump into, I see a question about a boat. A customer dropped off a bow. That you dropped the boat off with some RPM issues, and yeah, okay. So we've had it for 2 weeks, and you haven't heard from them. I would tell you, give them a call, or you can text us just text the service department on our landline, and they'll tell you where we're at. I haven't talked to, we didn't do a Tech Tuesday today, so I didn't get a chance to talk with Israel and see how they're doing, whether they're behind back there. I think this time of year,
ready, and we got techs that are at classes and stuff like that. So it's
but
we're playing catch up.
Yeah, give them a call. Definitely, don't worry. You're absolutely not pestering them. But I would probably say text is actually a great way because they can get back to you. So sorry, just wanted to. I saw that question in there and want to interject.
Some baits to give away too.
Oh yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Yeah. So if you guys haven't seen it popping up on the screen. Get those comments in and questions in, and we'll jump to the question here in just a second. But we're going to give some stuff away. God, we're a little rusty on these lives for giving stuff away. I don't know. All right, you want to jump into this question?
What do you got?
The question. I think it fits to what he's going to be doing in the next couple of weeks. The next week.
This one?
Yep.
All right. So a late flight, big tournament. What strategy do you use?
He's biased.
Yeah, that could go a lot of different ways in these bigger formatted tournaments right now. Being late flight, you obviously are weighing in last too if you blast off late, and almost all the time you're getting some extra time at the end of the day. So if there's a good bite going on at the end of the day, that's a really good thing. But, if that's not happening, the early morning bite's the deal. Like, going over to Smith Lake right now, they just had the Major League guys over there this week. And Dustin Cannell, local guy there, he really whacked them over there at Smith Lake. And he caught them all in a very obvious place right at the dam. So I know those first flights are just itching to get to right there. So if you're in the 200 boat, I think I'm boating 100 and something this weekend. I know there's no chance of me getting to where Dustin caught those or Jordan caught his up on the upper end and Ryan. So what I've got to do is be able to run a pattern instead of a fishing hole. You got all these waypoints on there. You just have to block it out in your mind that I'm probably not going to get on one of my waypoints, but I'm going to have to go run a pattern with a crankbait, with a spinnerbait, and just understand the type of cover I'm looking for instead of being able to get on an exact one that I want to get on. And then hopefully, if it works out ideally at the end of the day, when you've got that extra time and those first boats are coming back in that had to blast off early, maybe you've got an hour and a half on some of the places that you would have liked to fish that morning. So that's the ideal way that it would work out.
I was going to ask a question when you talked earlier about working your way into, and in this time of the year, we all know where the fish want to go.
Yeah.
So say you,
Well, you all do. I don't know where the first one.
they all want to go spawn. That's what they're working towards.
Yeah.
That's what they're working towards. They all want to go spawn. They want to go do their business, survive the species. That's their biological need. That's what they want to do. So ultimately, they all want to get somewhere where they can do that. How long will you spend in, like, say you go in, you see bait in that first third that you're talking about, don't generate a bite. How long will you spend in that before you move to the next one, before you move to the next one?
What I would like to do, depending on the size of the creek I'm in, I would like to leave that first third after I feel like I've at least given it a good chance. I've hit the deeper points, that 18 to 20 foot. I've hit that 3 or 4 foot. I've covered the edges of it. I've checked the water column, and that may take an hour. I would say an hour would be a minimum that I would dissect the first part of that creek, at least on my initial approach into the first time at the lake or first time on that body of water. And once I'm convinced that, hey, them fish just aren't here, I would move on to the next one. And I'd probably say an hour to two in that section, then move on to the next section, and probably about the same thing. And then if I've gotten to the back and still no fish, I'd probably have to just completely pack it all up and head to another.
What you're talking
another
about
lake.
right there, you're in a tournament. Let's say you're getting that. You're now 6 hours, 4.5 to 6 hours in one creek.
Yeah.
You really spend that much time trying to pick it apart.
I was probably answering it a little bit different viewpoint than you. I was thinking more on a practice day or trying to go into a tournament. Hopefully by tournament day, I'm at least dialed into what section they're in. So I really wasn't putting that tournament timetable on answering that question. In a practice day, I've got 10 hours. I would like to spend, an hour or two in each section of that creek. But what that's going to do is going to key me into clues, because when I run across the river to the other creek, most likely it's going to be the same scenario over there. So that's what the way I would like to approach that is an hour or two in each section.
So while you mentioned the spawn, thoughts on the cold weather we're expecting and any change in the pre-spawn pattern?
Yeah.
Or the fish around here just used to the chaotic weather?
My opinion on that, when you're referring to the cold weather we're expecting, I think this is only a day or two. And I don't think it's going to be that big an impact on the overall water temperature. It may change the surface temperature. If it gets down into the 20s Friday night, Saturday night like it's supposed to, it may drop that surface temperature a little bit. But over the past 2 weeks, we've had a lot of 60, 70 degree days. That water temperature got all the way up to near 60 in the past week. It's not going to drop all the way back down into the 40s and make a big change on the lake. After a cold front, obviously, it hits them in the head and it'll have some impact on them. Not quite like it does in a Florida lake, but here it'll have some impact. But I don't think it's going to be just terrible impact on the fish. But fish being cold-blooded, when it's the water temperature 75, their body's 75, their blood's 75. When it drops down to 45, they drop down to 45. So the big thing about fishing right now and understanding the fish is knowing that water temperature in that 50-degree range where it is right now, their body's starting to warm up from where it's been in those 40s and near 30s. But they're starting to become a little bit more aggressive as they get into that 50-degree range right now where they are. So they're wanting to move around and eat. But the biggest thing that cold water does to them is it slows their metabolism down. So people think that they don't bite as well in the winter, but they still have to eat in the winter. But the biggest thing that goes on is when they eat something, their metabolism's so slow, they don't really have to eat again, sometimes for another day or two. So reaction baits, and we've got several of those on the desk here we'll talk about, but fish still eat, and they're opportunists. If a crankbait comes by them in the winter, they're opportunists. They're going to take advantage and eat that. So you don't get as many bites in the winter because the fish aren't out chasing those crawfish. They're not chasing those shad. They're basically just sitting there with a slow metabolism, and they're taking advantage as the opportunists they are to eat whatever comes by them.
All right. Hope I'm sure we're going to get some more spawn and pre-spawn questions coming through. We got some water temperature questions, but we got one here. Thoughts on changing fluorocarbon after every trip?
Can I answer this one?
Sure.
No, not necessary. The reason that we changed fluorocarbon or changed fishing line in the past because monofilament absorbs water, and it swells and shrinks and swells and shrinks, and so you get that degradation as well as UV degradation. The way that I do it is I will strip off 8-10 feet of the end of the line and cut it on fluorocarbon and retie to that. Unless I hang it a lot and I'm stretching it out, because you can break the molecular structure of the fluorocarbon by stretching to try to break off a hung bait. I try to shock break that. But the way that I do it is I put it on for a tournament day, and I just take the little ends off of it, 8, 10, 12 feet, just the ones that I used a bunch. I may retie my leaders on spinning gear, but I may change it for tournament day, and I'll fish it through the practice for the next tournament, and then change it out for starting. So no, fluorocarbon doesn't absorb water, so you have less issue with breakage.
Your thoughts?
Very similar thoughts. I've been fishing the rocky lakes here recently, and even on these Coosa rivers, focusing a lot on rocks. I do exactly like Dano. I'll strip off enough of it to get rid of that damaged line near the end where it's been nicked and cut. And I'll probably keep my fluorocarbon on until it starts having so much line memory that it makes it more difficult to cast. So probably line memory dictates to me more, when I change mine than anything.
Well, I'm going to ask from the perspective of a new guy learning, spending the money on fluorocarbon. Obviously, y'all answer from a tournament perspective, which, hey, you got money on the line, and I think that's kind of a different mindset. So, but for a guy like me, can I get away with like the beginning of the season? Can I get away with fluorocarbon through the season and just to have fun?
I did a test when I moved here. I'll be honest with you, because I wanted to see, and I'm a Seaguar user. I did a test. I had a couple of rods that were spooled fresh from my last fishing trip when I moved here from California in 2014 with Invisex. And I wanted to see how long they lasted before they became unusable. And they were, aside from a little bit of coil, they were strong, sitting in my rod locker. I fished them for the better part of 2 years. And had no concern about them breaking when they started feeling brittle. And you could tell that when you start tying on, because maybe a tink, that one's getting off. But no, you don't have to. And nowadays, again, I'll speak from experience with Seaguar. There's guys here that I know right now that fish big money tournaments that they only use Red Label, which is more of a beginner to intermediate fluorocarbon. It's still really good line, and it's $15 a spool or something. But then Seaguar just came out with Basics fluorocarbon, which is an entry level fluorocarbon that's like $10. And they came out with a Tactics Braid too, which actually a lot of the guys are using that, even though it's made to be a beginner level. But no, I've tested it and I'm comfortable with it for quite a long time.
Well, thanks for asking that question, Justin. I learned something, and since I'm here with the computer, I get to ask the questions. So, yeah. So don't forget, we do have some tackle, and I think we'll jump into that here in a few minutes on what you brought and why to show off to everybody. Unfortunately, we're not getting to watch you toss it in the water and see if we can put a fish in the boat.
Couldn't catch any right now.
Oh, come on! You can't say that.
I'm the only one that's blanked on this show.
Right now you can lie because we can't prove it otherwise, right? So, yeah, don't forget, drop a comment in. If you don't have a question, just tell us where you're watching from. I always like to see where everybody is. Let's go with. Is this person related to you?
Yeah.
And I know how do your electronics help you with your daily pattern changes?
It doesn't. The stuff he has doesn't help. He needs like 4 more graphs, newer ones, all 15-inch.
Exactly.
So he said you need to work harder. and I think from getting to know you over the last couple of years, I think we probably could do a whole show with you on electronics.
Yeah.
So you wanna throw anything out there with?
Well, my best stab at the electronics question is I'd feel lost out there without them now. And about 70s when I grew up fishing with the flashers with my dad and some of his buddies, we'd have to ride right over the fish, and it may take you a day just to cover a little pocket. I can shoot that side imaging out now 200 feet each side. I can go through there. I might not can see the detail out there 200 feet, but I can tell if it's the place I want to fish or not. It's just, it's invaluable what you can do with electronics now. I couldn't function without them.
And you're running all Humminbird
and Garmin.
You got a Garmin, so you got the live scope.
Optics,
okay.
Yeah, he's got live scope.
All right. All right. We're gonna go. This is a long one, and it's gonna be I'll call it a fishing politics question, but I think there's some interesting stuff in here with tournament directors making schedules now 1 year in advance. There's no way they can truly understand what the conditions will be with anglers to get there. Do you think there's certain lakes that perform better in Alabama at certain times, which I think is that's a good that's an interesting conversation. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And then with that said, do you feel like tournament directors should listen to their anglers when setting up schedules?
I'm gonna take that one too, because that's a politically charged question, and Tracy doesn't need to be in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. The leagues out there, professional sports, they have, and when you deal with fishing, when there are 20 different tournament organizations, you get the times that you can. Now, I think personally, there should be some times that some of these fisheries should be off limits. I'm not the guy that says don't fish during the spawn, but in the summertime, there's not enough people trained to maintain the fish well enough. And when you go in post-spawn, May, June, on some of these bodies of waters, Guntersville's a different story. Some of those lakes are a different story. But on some of these bodies of water, I'm sorry, these fishermen aren't trained well enough to maintain their fish, and they kill them. And again, I got a license that says I can kill 5 of them a day, whether they're 12 inches or 12 pounds. I have no problem with people killing fish, none. But until the anglers want to be completely responsible to understand the whole picture of what they have to do, they shouldn't have a say just because the fishing might be better during a certain time of the year than the other one. That's not a response that competitors should have. If you're a competitor, you compete the conditions, and if we're versatile, we learn how to compete. And if we're not versatile, we stink.
So I'm gonna throw out from what I've observed as a new guy, learning more and more about the fishing industry, in terms of picking lakes a year in advance and all that kind of stuff. I think to your point of the amount of fishing, with the growth of the sport, it's just not practical to wait because someone else is going to take the spot. So that's just, it seems like that's the truth, that as a director, if I'm trying to do that to provide that structure, whether it's a full-blown tournament trail that's really trying to make a big profit or something like that, you got to get the ramps reserved. That's just the way things work. And I dare say that if you waited and waited and waited, then when you called to try and get it all scheduled, you'd have trouble finding the space to get on the ramp. So, and is that fair?
Yeah, and let's be fair. I could take 6 fishermen in a room, and I could say,
"Is the sky blue?
What color is that?" They'd all agree that it was blue, but they'd all tell me 6 different shades.
Yeah.
So everybody has their own reasons for what they want to do, and a tournament director has to absolutely be, no, this is what we're going to do. And in an organization, I would give you that there might be times that are better to go to a Smith Lake versus a Neely Henry. I can see that. Maybe the deeper, clearer water ones with maybe spotted bass are better in the colder conditions because they're a little bit more predictable. And maybe the river fisheries, you kind of want to put them in the spring and the fall. I can see that kind of consideration. But ultimately, fishermen are so fickle and we love them. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. I love the fishermen. We'll spend the rest of my career trying to help everybody accomplish what they want to accomplish in this sport. But we're all just so fickle that we go there and look at them and go, oh, they shouldn't have put it here because I fish better. Well, everybody has that same opinion. And if you're fishing a league against the same 10 or 100 or 225 guys, you're all going to get somewhere that it's going to suck. And we just got to figure out how to catch them better. That's not to be mad or any. That's just my opinion.
So I'm gonna throw you into this question, and I'm kind of curious, just from in terms of, I mean, a lifetime around Northeast Alabama. If you got kind of your preference just in lakes, through the seasons, how do you look at that? Where you'd want to go fishing to have the most fun, however you kind of categorize that, whether that's going out and catching monsters or just a fun style of fishing. What are your thoughts?
For me, my favorite lake's Gunnersville.
Okay.
So, but even second to that, I like grass lakes. So, if I was picking seasons, I like being on the Tennessee River early in the year for the reasons that Dano was talking about. He mentioned Smith Lake. Smith Lake's one of the better wintertime lakes, too, because of the volume of fish and the ease. So early in the year, Tennessee River, Smith Lakes feels more comfortable for me, and then getting into your river systems in the spring and summer. So the fall, I could go to any of them and probably be content, but still the Tennessee River system just where I feel more comfortable because of the grass. Neely Henry had zero grass when I was growing up. I mean, there wasn't a blade of grass on this lake in the 70s. So, this lake has evolved too, and, having grass now, I like it a little more now than I did growing up. But each month, I would rather be on a grass lake no matter which one it was.
All right. Let's throw this question in there, and then maybe start talking about what you got sitting here on the table and what we're going to give away to the folks in the comments. What water temp do you think is best for jig fishing?
Anytime we can keep West Logan off the water.
So this is coming from Kenny Pinnell. Water temperature for a jig. What I like to do, and it's probably more on Neely Henry, is whenever Kenny pulls into the parking lot, I'll try to walk by his boat and understand what bait's on the deck. So as soon as I start seeing the jigs tied on the deck, that's when I start throwing the jig. But in all seriousness, I'm a jig fisherman, so I like fishing a jig any time of year they'll bite it. The water temperature means nothing to me regarding a jig. I've been throwing a jig for the past 2 months in December, January, February, and I'll even throw it more through the fall. So, 3 months.
Did you forget how to count?
Maybe.
Okay.
But I'll throw a jig every
it's the end of the day.
Every time I go out, I'm gonna have a jig tied on. So water temperature means nothing to me for jigs. Some of the guys out there may give you a better answer on when to throw the jig, but every time I go to the water is the right time for me to throw a jig.
Well, so I notice as we talking about that, when to throw a jig. We kind of said when you got here, go grab some stuff out of the loft.
Yeah.
And what's some stuff that you'd be throwing today if we could be out on the water? And I'm only seeing one jig on the table. Do you want to kind of go through
when you talk jigs? Yeah. There's like 7 different ways you can fish a jig.
So you can do anything.
Right, with different heads.
Yeah.
So why don't you break down real quick what the 4 seasons, what kind of jig you might be putting out there? Because you got to break it down, right?
Yes. So
now I'm going to go in the weeds.
In front of me, I know you can't really see all this, but I've really only got 2 things. It looks like I've got a lot of baits here, but I've got crawfish baits and I've got shad baits. And that's really, and speaking winter right now, that's what the fish are eating. They're either eating shad or they're eating crawfish. I am lumping blueback herring in with shads, which that's a whole different creature in itself, the bluebacks, because of their tendencies, but they're still bait fish. So I've got bait fish and crawfish, and that's all that the fish are eating right now. So for jigs, back to your question, right now, I mentioned earlier bass being opportunists. They're opportunists, and they're going to eat crawfish or they're going to eat shad. So all I'm really trying to do out there right now is mimic a crawfish out there on bottom. I grabbed a green pumpkin jig there with a net bait trailer on it. and that's as mimics the crawfish that I'm seeing right now as good as anything. So,
Pocket crawl.
I don't know if it's gonna. I think we gotta go back here. That's all right.
Look,
The camera wants to focus on our faces.
Baby pocket crawl, green pumpkin red. It's a 3 3/4 inch. That's the smaller version.
But just trying to mimic that crawfish out there right now. And as I was fishing this past week, one of the first things I do when I pull up on a point, if I saw the fish up in the water column, I'd grab one of these shad type baits. If I was seeing more of the fish near the bottom and I knew those fish were, feeding on the bottom, I'd pick up the jig. So that's what I'm doing right now, is just dragging something really slow across the bottom, trying to trigger that reaction by giving them that opportunity to eat a crawfish and catch them on the jig. I would switch up to the bait fish type stuff if I saw them in the water column, but continuing on with that jig question, what would happen next is these fish are going to transition on up near the banks for their spawning areas. And if I'm sticking with just jigs, then I'm going to start getting into the swim jigs, the 1/4 ounce, the 3/8 ounce jigs, and start swimming around the structure, the wood, the grass, and such with a jig at that point. Over at Smith Lake, I know I'm talking about Smith Lake a lot because a lot of tournaments going on over there right now. There is one more stage before that. That's such a deep lake. Those fish, 200 or 300 foot deep lake. Those fish are coming up out of that 20, 30, 40 foot range. One of their first stops on that lake is actually the floating docks. Every dock on that lake's a floating dock. So you can actually swim a jig out there, maybe even an 80 foot of water right underneath those. I don't want some of you guys to know that. Damien's on here still. Anyway, swim a jig under some of those docks and maybe get bit about 2 foot under those floats that are sitting on those docks before you actually have to transition up to the bank with a swim jig.
Since he opened the can of worms, it's the black ones with algae growing on them. Don't ever throw it around that.
There you go. And then after that swim jig bite kind of transition, those fish get into post spawn, start moving back to their summer haunts. I'll go back to the similar jig that we were throwing here with the dragging it around, but be a whole lot more aggressive with it. I'll hop the jig mostly at that time of the year where I'm hopping it maybe 4 or 5 feet up off the bottom and letting it flutter back down. Same jig, but just a different technique. And then, some of these grass lakes, it starts really matting up or it starts getting really thick on Neely Henry, some of this cover. I'll use some heavier jigs and use the jig more as a punching style as you get into the summer and into the fall. So various ways to use a jig to Dano's point. Jig to me is the most versatile bait, and that's why I said I would have it in my hand every tournament I go to, every practice day.
Well, do you have a preference? I love a compact jig, especially on a lake like Neely or one of these places. Do you prefer a full size, or do you like the compact styles?
To answer that, it would be several different scenarios. At Smith Lake right now, I'm trying to mimic those crawfish. I really kind of liking the smaller profile. Whenever I start swimming, I start going to the white jigs, swimming it in the grass. I'm really not even trying to mimic crawfish anymore. I'm trying to mimic shad. Yeah. So I like a bigger profile. And if I'm at Gunnersville and fish are eating on the gizzard shad, 7, 8 inches long, I like a bigger profile. I kind of dictate the size of that jig and that profile based on where I'm fishing it and how I'm fishing it. In the summertime, I'll probably resort back to something similar, compact again when I'm hopping it up.
Yeah, I just on Neely, I love I
do too.
The mini flip from Missile Jigs, and now they just came out with that mini swim. That thing just gives me chills. I love those things on this river.
Well, I think this is probably a good relatable question to the jig discussion. What's a good bait to get through the floating eelgrass in Gunnersville?
Your trolling motor.
At Gunnersville eelgrass, obviously, it's taken over. It is a very big nuisance up there, and there's all kind of activities going on trying to figure out ways to get rid of it. Lots of different discussions. But right now, as anglers, we just have to work through it. And I got really frustrated the first year or two out there whenever you'd roll into your favorite fishing spot and it's just covered with eelgrass. Unless it's frog season and you can throw a frog and that eelgrass is somewhere where you can get a frog on it, I just leave immediately. I don't sit there and let myself get mentally out of shape where I'm just not able to function and do what I need to do fishing that fishing hole. I'll leave and I'll come back to it. So I don't even try to get through that. A jig probably would be about the only bait you could actually, get through Texas it, and maybe a Texas rig worm, something like that. But for the most part, I just leave whenever I go that. You just have to fish the winds at Gunnersville more now. Look at the wind in the morning. Wind's coming out of the north. That means all the eelgrass is blowing to the south end of the lake. You're clean on the north. Wind's coming out of the west. Just play
Cleaner.
cleaner. You play the winds up there in the currents to pick your fishing holes with eelgrass. It's really turned into part of the game up there. Is having to consider where the eelgrass is going to be.
All right. Why don't you take us through so everybody can see what you got on the table here, and why you grabbed what you grabbed.
We've talked a lot about it already. Being an opportunist, again, I've used that word 100 times, but that's really what's going on now. The fish are just sitting there. The metabolism's low. They're opportunists. So I'm really trying to mimic, the crawfish like we talked about, or, the shad with a spinner bait, and then the lipless crankbaits, 8 to 10 foot diver, and a jerk bait. So all of these have a little bit different role, but they're really just trying to do two things: mimic that crawfish or mimic that shad. So when we're back to that conversation we're having about the thirds of the creek, when I roll in there at first, I see the fish out there in the water column, I'm gonna grab the jerk bait just immediately and start pulling on the jerk bait, trying to get that reaction strike in the water column, And then if I'm not seeing them out there, but I'm thinking they might be, hugging the bottom out there on that deeper, I'll use these lipped crankbaits. Rock crawler by Spro. And I'm digging it out there on the bottom, seeing if I can get that reaction bite out there on the bottom.
What's your depth on that? And a line will make a difference, but
Yeah.
what's your depth of range?
With 15-pound line, I know that seems a little heavy for crankbaits, but I like it because I'm usually throwing this around rocks and nicks. With 15-pound line, this lure is designed to go 9 to 14. I can hit bottom pretty continuously in 13 foot.
With 15?
With 15.
You're smoking some of these socks.
13 foot, I can hit bottom. Back up. If there's a rock at Smith Lake, I can hit bottom with a rock that's a foot or two off the bottom in 13 foot.
Mm-hmm. So what's your full setup for particularly for the newbies? What's your full setup to throw something like that? Rod, reel?
Yeah, this is a 6 foot diver, right?
Yeah,
little John
that's the smaller one. So this is we'll talk about that in a minute. But to Michael's question, my full setup is I like about a 7 foot rod. I've got a 7 foot halo. And they're cranking rod, and got a lot of give to it on the hook set. So 7 foot cranking rod, and then on my reel, a lot of your crankbait guys will talk about some of the 5-4, 5-5 ratios. I still don't go that low. I like to stay in that 6-4, 6-3 range. I'll reel a little bit slower, but it is maybe a little bit more work. But I don't have a lot of confidence when I get below that 6 ratio reel. Some of the pros that do this every day, they'll have a different opinion of that, but that's for me. It seems like I get a lot of bites when they'll hit it and they're coming straight towards you. I just don't feel like I can take up the slack enough for those lower speed ratios. So 6-4 reel is what I use. Online, Dano pointed that out a little bit. These crankbaits all run a little bit different. This one's designed to go 9 to 14. 15-pound line, I can hit bottom 12 to 13 foot. I can go down to 12-pound line. I can probably hit bottom in about 14. I could go down to 10, maybe even get it stretched to 15 foot. So line size, I'll throw this crankbait this next week on 2 different lines on my deck. I'll have this exact crankbait on a 10-pound line. I'll have it on a 15-pound line.
You're talking fluorocarbon, right?
Fluorocarbon line, sorry. And the only reason I have those 2 different sizes is because of how deep that I want this crankbait to get. I could get a bigger crankbait that would go deeper and I could stay with that heavier line, but I want the smaller profile bait to get down there deeper. And the only way to do that is with smaller line.
You want a KVD story on crankbait lines?
Go ahead.
So Kevin, I actually did an article with Kevin in Bassmaster magazine called Master of Puppets. And the picture that I took is Kevin with all of his Strike King baits hanging off line on his hands was the intro picture for that. And here's how detailed the guy gets. His 6XDs, he can get an extra half a foot to a foot depending on the length of cast and distance of the wind and that kind of stuff by going to 10-pound fluorocarbon. If he goes up to 12, he loses that half a foot to a foot, but he doesn't have to retie it every 10 to 12 casts. He can fish it for longer. And so for him, the trade-off going to a 6XD, he might hit 18 foot with 12, but he was hitting 18 and a half, 19 with the 10-pound line, but he was having to retie it every 8 to 10 casts. So for him, the trade-off of that foot was half a foot, basically. And he also knew that in the silent 6XDs, he gained about a half a foot over the rattling ones, because in the rattling ones there's a ball in there that knocks the center of axis off a little bit and makes the wobble change a little bit. Yeah, that's Kevin. But so crankbait line will change the depth a little bit, may change your angle of descent a little bit, but you also have to weigh, like he said, you want a little bit stronger line because you're going to beat it around rocks.
So any difference in your setup for throwing spinnerbaits?
Spinnerbaits are kind of like jigs; they can be used at any depth. But the reason that I have the spinnerbait out there is because if you're out on that, you've kind of narrowed it down to where they're not out there deeper; they're really up there shallow. They're hugged up to a piece of wood. This is probably a more likely what I would throw up there, really shallow. You can bounce the crankbaits off of some of that stuff, but you're gonna get it hung a lot. This is pretty weedless and pretty versatile, and anybody can tie this on and catch them at any depth. So even for me in these tournaments, I'll use this a lot when I get up there shallow.
What rod and similar mindset?
I've got a Halo 7.3 that I use for this, medium heavy, real ratio 7.3, 7.4 is what I use on it, but similar setup.
All right. Well,
that changes too by the cover, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're throwing a spinnerbait around docks or wood or rocks, you may have 20 on there. If I'm fishing a spinnerbait like this over, not much cover around the grass, maybe a little bit of riprap or something, I might have 15 on there.
Yeah.
And I may go down to a 6.5 foot rod if I'm fishing around cover, just because I want to be able to target place more.
Yeah, good point.
All right. Let's jump back in the questions. And again, guys, we're gonna pick a winner when we get done. And all that stuff we just went through, we're gonna send it to you. What worm do you recommend on your Ned rigs for Smith?
Tracy tells me he likes a 12-inch long hand poured from Southern California called Upton's Customs on a 1 pound head. Damien.
That's a bad.
I'm assuming there's some inside joke in there. So
yeah,
but he just told me it was a joke.
I don't mind. Yeah, Damien's torturing me here. He already knows the answer, but I don't throw Ned rigs, so I don't even have a good answer for this. I don't fish on the professional circuit where most of my tournaments are. Last week those MLF guys, it was 8 days that they were at Smith Lake. Group A, Group B, then 8 days of it. So I don't find myself in that situation very often where I need to catch a lot of numbers, a lot of pound fish, pound and a half fish. Not saying Ned rig can't catch a big one, but most of these one-day derbies that I fish, you need to go out there and have a big bag because it's the best fishermen in the South that we fish against in these ABT trails and BFLs. So Ned rig, more times than not, for me, is not going to get it done in those trails. So I don't even own a Ned rig. I don't own a spinning rod. It's a gap, weakness on my part, but I don't have it.
Ugh, I knew that already. And yes, it is a gap.
Well,
all I know this, Jason Christie won a Bassmaster Classic, and about half his fish were weight on a spinning rod.
Multi-day tournament.
Well, so speaking of that, I think this is a good question. When you don't have multiple days and you got 1 day, how can I catch them on this Saturday?
You get your Tracy Robinson wedding ring on.
How can you catch one on Saturday? Again, that'd be a good question to finish that with which lake. I'm assuming by the name up here, he's probably talking about Gunnersville, which I didn't do good on recently. So this is another jab right here, I think. But I would probably follow Willie Staten, who's asking this question. But Gunnersville right now, it's the same thing going on as everywhere else. Fish headed toward the bank, noses to the bank, find where they're at. They're going to be around the grass at Gunnersville. Pick up that rattle trap. Not that that's the best choice of baits right now, but you can cover so much water with it. And that's the reason that I picked up the lipless bait earlier, is because you can cover so much water and find them this time of year. And then once you find them, pick up the jig, pick up the jerk bait, pick up the spinner bait. But anyway, pick your favorite color rattle trap up, Willie, and go start chunking it. You know the deal.
Your friends like to bust your chops.
Well,
and I'm sitting here saying the same thing because I'm doing it to you.
Based on the forecast this weekend, I think the best thing would be to come to Fish Fest and come get some free food. And yeah, that seems like based on the forecast. So, all right. I'm a fair weather guy. I don't want to get out in the cold. you guys to get out in the freezing cold to go fishing. Mad props. All right, would it be possible for a company to make braided line with a fluorocarbon leader already tied on for spinning rod? Hey, time leaders.
I'm sure, Justin, that it's probably a possibility. I wouldn't want it. I'd have to retie anyway, because then I have to change out my braided line every time I broke off. I use that a lot, and what I do is I tie. So I tie my Albright special. I cinch it down. I reel the knot into the reel, so I might have this much line out when I've tied the leader on. I reel the knot into the reel, and then I turn it one more time. So I may have 8, 10, 12 feet on there. Albright specials are really simple knot to tie, and the good thing is you know it doesn't work when you try to snug it down, because if it comes untied, you tied it wrong. And that's another thing. I mean, I could demonstrate that at another time. But the truth is, I mean, Seagar with that Tactics braid right now, they're actually putting a loop of fluorocarbon in there to give people the leader material, but it doesn't come tied. You'd have to tie it eventually. And it's like anything else. It's practice to know how to do it, and I set myself up to tie it the same way every time. But it is what it is. And here's another thing for it. If I'm fishing deeper than 20 feet with a spinning rod, unless I'm vertical, I won't put braid on my spinning rod. I'll just put fluorocarbon on, because braided line floats, and the bait's on the bottom, and the line might have an arc over it, and to get to the feel point of the rod, I have to take that slack out of the line, and I'm creating all kinds of movement and the potential for feeling a false positive in a finesse bait.
All right. So we've already established that you don't have a spinning rod, so a leader wouldn't apply to you on a spinning rod. But I guess, what are your thoughts to what Dano's talking about?
I'm gonna agree with him because I know he knows more about it than I do. I'm gonna take it easy out on that one. I don't.
I do it
Did
that
you
way
use leaders in anything? All right.
on a Carolina rig.
Rig. That's on it.
But that has a barrel swivel
Yeah,
in
that
it,
I
so
can
he
tie
doesn't.
directly to.
But I also I do the same setup, but I put mono on some of my topwater rods if the water's real clear. But I tie like that much leader on there.
All right. Well, guys, that's we've gotten through all the questions, and we've been going for 52 minutes. So I'd say that's pretty good. I hate that we couldn't get on the water today.
I hate that we didn't get to, but I'm liking that I'm dry.
Yeah. I'm ready for summer. But that's all right. I did see James Spann said that we are not getting another blizzard of '93. Apparently, that's a rumor that's gone around for Friday. So, Scott. All right. Go to Weiss Lake to bass fish at the end of April. What structure do I need to look for?
End of April?
What's the
End of April, again, that's right at the end of the actual spawning process, the laying process in the spawn. So you're still going to have some fish on bed there in April. So definitely an opportunity to get up in those shallows, cruising around and see fish and still bed fish, sight fish for those fish. So that's probably one of the better tactics even into late April. But there is a group of fish that will have spawned out in early April that will already have made that transition to the post-spawn, headed towards the deeper water. The main thing I would focus on at that point are the secondary points between wherever they spawned at in the river, your Carolina rigs, crankbaits, dragging the football head jigs around, trying to find those fish that spawned early. There'll be another group of fish that's kind of in that mid-cycle. They've already spawned and they're guarding fry, boat docks, dragging Cincos around those boat docks when they're up there guarding those fry. When they come off the bed, the first thing they're going to do is go get on the first piece of structure, whether it's a wood, a rock, a stump, a boathouse, a ladder. So the first piece of structure next to spawning grounds would be the general answer to your question. And it doesn't have to be any one of those. It could be all of them.
All of them.
I love, believe it or not, yeah, the wacky rig stick bait.
Yeah.
I like an ocho, but walking a frog over those, most people don't know how to walk one, but walking a frog over those spawning fry girders, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Makes you feel all funny and bad.
When's your favorite time to be out on Weiss?
On Weiss, I'm a ledge fisherman by heart, so when they first really get out there before everybody beats them up, middle of May is my favorite time to be at Weiss, when I can start hitting those fish that just starting to show up on those points or starting to school up. They haven't been hammered on and caught all the time, so that's my number one time is May.
So I'll throw out to you, Scott. Also, if you go back, I see you're over on YouTube. You go back through our fishing reports. Maybe go back to last April. We've been doing that now long enough that we can say that. But Lee Pitts is a regular for us. He's actually a guide on Weiss and Neely. So I'd say head back to those videos and see what was kind of talked about back in that time last year. So I can't offer anything in terms of fishing expertise, but I can tell you there's some videos out there that'll help you out. So, all right, let's pick a winner and get it done. I'm gonna just kind of scroll up and down through the comments that we got on here, and fortunately Facebook and YouTube combine. So you tell me when to stop, and we'll go with that. So, Tracy, when do you want me to stop? All right. Oh, there we go. Justin, hit me up. Give us a little DM on Facebook, and we'll get contact. If you're coming for Fish Fest,
he wins the tackle pack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If we don't have time to go through all of it.
That's fine.
So let's Justin, if you're coming to Fish Fest, then I'll set this stuff aside and come find me, and we'll get you all this. That's pretty good. That's pretty good pack.
25. That's about 45, 50. There's another $10 lure. That's $11. Gee, that might be the most expensive one we've ever done.
Well, y'all need to ask for Tracy to come on more often. But hey, I guess Fish Fest Saturday. Hope for those of you that are still hanging out with us can make it. We'll have boats in the water Friday. I'm sure we're gonna be keeping an eye on the weather and how much fun that's all gonna be. But you're not gonna join us on Saturday because
I'm heading to Coleman tomorrow.
He's got a tournament
thing to fish.
That comes first.
But and then so what time are we doing? Because actually Justin I think had asked in another post about what time the panel's going to be. We just found out some updated
10 o'clock.
information.
We're going to do the first panel with John Cruz, Cliff Pace, Greg Vinson, Wes Logan, and Scott Canterbury. We're going to do that at 10 o'clock because the Elite Series practice actually starts on Sunday, so we got to get those guys going and out of the way there at Santee Cooper. Now it's a fairly short drive for them. It's only 6 hours, so I don't say short drive, but man, I've been driving. It's a short drive now. But you can get there.
4 tanks of gas
With my camper, 3.
Yeah.
3.
Anyway, but then we're going to do an afternoon one with John Cox and let's see who else is going to be here. Andrew Johnson's going to be in that one. That's another good local guy to get some good stuff for. Gentry Gordy's going to be here for that one. We'll take a look and might even include some of our kayak pros in that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that one's probably going to be around 2.
Okay. So and then we'll see. If we want to do some dedicated a kayak panel. Honestly, it's still But we're gonna have from the kayak side of things, a couple of guys that have been out fishing on the national trail, and then a handful of guys that have done a lot of the club stuff and have kind of seen that sport change. We got a lot of fun stuff. A couple of guys bringing some pretty unique trailer setups for kayak. I know you big boat guys don't.
Joe's was cool. I'd like to have that same setup for a bass boat, to be honest with you.
So that it's some pretty cool setups we're gonna have in here.
He's got a tackle room on the front of his trailer.
Oh, wow.
I ain't kidding you. It's freaking cool.
Yeah. And I think he knows a thing or two about the catching fish on these lakes around here. Joe McElroy, for those of y'all, if you know him, he's going to be here. So, all right. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for being here. We'll try and figure out when we can get out on the water at some point this season. But the weather. It just kind of stinks that this week is when he decides to do this. But
no, it's a good weather for Fish Fest. Because unless you have to be out there,
you're gonna be.
Well, I guess
you're gonna be here.
I guess I'm thinking about. I was supposed to be on the water today, and we're looking at doing a kayak live on Friday morning, and I don't know how that's going to work out if the conditions persist. But anywho's,
it's actually supposed to be a decent day for. Goodness, 39 degrees is the high on Saturday. We'll have the heaters out, folks.
Yes. Well, guys, thank y'all so much for hanging out. Some good questions, well, I hope you do get to get out and maybe do some fishing. But we certainly prefer this Saturday for you to come on over here to Buck